Good evening. I'm going to relate to you story number 40, the Grove Street Haunted House. And this story is going to relate some people I know that lived there, what they encountered, and then on to what I encountered there when my turn came to live there. And then I can move on to some other stuff, you know. I want to get this one out of the way. Put on my anti-glare device. So, I'm not sure how to tell this story. It kind of takes place with different groups of people over different periods of time. I'll just tell the story, right? I'll start out with the history of the house, which was kind of interesting. And then how other people came to live there. And people that I knew that told me their ghost stories. And then my own. So, all right, the house, Grove Street, actually from where I'm sitting right now, is a stone's throw. Almost literally, it's just up the street from me. And the house was built in 1822, the huge house. It started out in 1822, it was a church in this small village that I live in central New York. And in 1873, the people of the church, I guess, got their money together or something, and they built a big brick church, St. Patrick's, which still stands there, and it's packed to capacity Sundays, or, you know. And somebody in 1873 bought the old wooden building that was standing there. They, instead of tearing it down to build a brick place, they, in a small engineering feat for this little town back then, they moved the wooden building approximately maybe 200 yards, about 4 or 5 houses up the street to where it sits today. And the person that bought that house added a 3rd floor to it, and it became the hotel and bar room for the town. The train used to stop right behind it. People get on, get off the train, and there was a place to get a bite to eat, a drink, and a room. And Auburn, New York is up the line a ways, about 20 miles up the line. And that was how this house started. It started as a church, and then it got moved, got a 3rd story put on it, and the 3rd floor had like hotel rooms. Like if you walk up there, it's unchanged. There's no electric lights, no plumbing. It's really eerie on the 3rd floor, and dilapidated old horsehair laths, you know, crumbling, and really old wallpaper just hanging down in sheets. Nobody's lived up on that 3rd floor probably in at least 100 years, at least, probably more than that. Right. Some say that General Custer used to drink there. And actually I looked it up, his wife was going to college in Auburn, New York. And he probably did. He would have, if he had taken the train to see her, he would have stopped there. Mary Todd Lincoln used to come to this town, and after the Civil War, after the death of Abe Lincoln, and this was a spiritualist center in America, central New York was, back then. And word has it they used to have seances, and she was trying desperately to contact her husband, late husband, and her deceased, I think, 2 children. So she might have stayed there as well. So there's a little bit of history to the place, you know. A big deal for a little town like this. I mean, this town's population's about 2,000, something like that. So, around about 1900, after all that, somebody turned it into a duplex. And I don't know what happened for the next 20 years or so, but eventually these 2 Italian women, sisters, moved in there. One lived on one side, one lived on the other. And I knew people that knew them when they were elderly, and they still live there. And they've been there forever. And they like to drink beer and wine. And I asked somebody, what were they like? And they said, well, we used to always pick them up their beer. And they were pretty nice. You know, they got along pretty well. And they made wine, and they brewed there, as it would turn out. They both of them were into brewing. They're long gone now. Well, let's see. Well, some other people came into it. My brother actually took possession of the house and lived there with his wife and kid, 2 kids, for a while. And my brother's not a very superstitious person at all. In fact, when I used to tell him my ghost stories, he'd kind of make fun of me. Woo, make fun of me, you know. I don't blame him. What the heck? You know, it's all fun. But he had some stories to tell me. And stories of different things. I'm just going to tell what I remember. That his son, who was about 3, was being visited every night by a man who would just come in. They would hear their son, whose room was down the hall on the 2nd floor, nobody on the 3rd floor. They'd hear him up out of bed talking to somebody, playing around. And they asked him what's going on. He'd tell the ghost man he comes every night, that he was real nice, he liked kids. Well, they got around to it and they asked him, what's his name? And this is a 3-year-old. He says his name is Gustav. That's Gustuv. T-A-V. Gustav. Now, I got to ask you, what 3-year-old kid's going to come up with a name, Gustav? Well, here's where I'm not sure. I think they'll let it be. Right, because the next people that moved into this place, he moved on. He moved on elsewhere. And some other people, family members, moved into there for a while. And they had little children too. At that point, my mother took possession of the house. And some other family members lived there. And they said that their child was being visited by a man, Gustav. And they told them, they got tired of it, the parents, and told their I don't know if it was their daughter, I'm not sure. They told him, tell Gustav that he can't see you anymore. And the kid was upset because they said Gustav liked kids. He was nice. He would just talk to them and he'd play with the toys and stuff. And that he was a nice ghost man. But the child obeyed, and apparently this is what the parents were telling me, because they weren't really superstitious people either. So everybody tells Tim their ghost stories, you know, see what Tim thinks of it. If Tim's got the input. They said that night the whole house went haywire. They said cabinets were open and closing and banging, and doors open and closing by themselves, and things rattling and shaking, and that went on for about 10 minutes, and then it stopped. And there was no more Gustav. That's the last they heard of him. So that's that ghost story that I'm relating. And I got one more to relate secondhand, and I'm going to get into my own. Some other family members moved in there, and they had a story. They came to me, flipped out. It was a man and a woman. They had children. And they said, Tim, there's this big, freaky acting cat in the basement. You got to come see this thing. It's not natural. And I'm like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Get out. Come on. No, you got to see this. The guy was scared. He says, you got to see this. Cat is not natural. It's really freaky acting. And this guy was scared. And I refused to entertain it. Believe it or not, I didn't want to entertain it. And, all right, yeah, okay. What did it look like? You know, it was just not natural. He said it was huge black cat, freaky acting. Not natural. Really something not right about it. Well, that just kind of came and went. And those people moved out. And then it was my turn to move in there. It's a huge house. So I moved in. But before I moved in, things started happening from day one. Not a whole lot, but it did start right on day one for me. I had to go in there and get the heater going. It was middle of winter. Clean the place out from the previous tenants there. And just start getting things ready. So I got with this guy that works on heaters, and he met me there. Nobody was living there at the time. And we both went down in the basement. It's a huge basement, really deep basement. Thick stone walls. Just to describe it. And a lot of there used to be a lot of old stuff in there when I moved there. like really old paintings or posters. And people would sign their names all over the walls from different, all the way back, like John Smith was, 1907 and so forth. Marianne, I remember that. It was kind of interesting old cellar. A lot of stuff in there. All right, so I'm down there talking to this guy that fixes heaters, right? And he goes back up to his truck outside to get some tools. So I'm down there by myself. This is where my first paranormal thing happens there. I'm going to try to explain this part of the basement. Where the Italian women were there before, they like to brew. Mostly wine, but they also brewed beer because the whole side of the house, there was a big ditch and it was just full of hops. There were a lot of hops plants growing all over the place. Well, they made themselves this little enclave in the basement with just some boards nailed up to kind of make it a separate little room. And all over the wall was all these dates in Italian writing in pencil, and where they were keeping track of their recipes by the date and how much and such like that. I thought that was kind of neat. Some of their brewing stuff was down there. They had a huge wooden, like a vat, the type where you actually stomp the grapes with your feet. I don't know what it's called, but it was a giant tub made out of wood. And it was pretty interesting. So the guy's gone out to his truck. And I want to explain, they built a wooden partition of boards in the middle of the basement, and it was like their little brewing room. And for some reason, I'm just standing there in front of this wall, and it's open right here, like the entrance, there's no door. And I'm just staring at this board, and the boards start shaking, like special effects on a movie. Just like this board's trying to shake itself off of a nail in front of my face. And I'm staring at it, and this board's freaking out, right? Now that canvas that. And I'm like, what the? Kind of weirded me out. And I walked away from it. And I just said, something not right with that. I walked away from it, and I'm standing in the middle of the place, waiting for the guy to come back. And believe it or not, I should have been scared. I wasn't. Not at all. I don't know why. Sometimes just absent-minded. This board's on a nail. It's shaking this much as my hand is. And you can see the other side of it. It's just some boards, really rough carpentry work. So I walked out there like, yeah. And I'm standing there, and an old pen, like a ballpoint pen, flew from somewhere in the room and landed right in front of my feet. And at that point, I picked it up, and then it finally dawned on me that I'm not alone down there. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. I heard the place was haunted. I was hoping for the best. Wasn't the case. Well, the guy comes downstairs, and I met him. I was walking out. I said, hey, you have a great day, all right? He says, yeah, you too. I'm thinking, like, you could deal with a ghost. I left him in there alone. But I don't think anything came of it. I never heard of it, but that's how I handled that. That was the first haunting. What else? Good Lord, there's a bunch of them. I was weirded out about the basement after that a bit. I mean, I wasn't terrified of it. I just didn't go down there if I didn't have to. That's my dog thumping, itching or something. One time, I just felt these really bad vibes. I was in my kitchen about something was at the base of the stairs, and maybe I shouldn't have done this, but I got my camera, turned the flash on, opened the door, took a picture. There's a huge green orb right at about this big, right at the base of the stairs. Really glowing green orb with, if I would have looked at it, there's probably a face in it. There was something in it. I didn't look at it, right? It gets a little more freaky. I got a couple more. The story number 6, Superman Goes Home, that happened in that house. That was a good thing. And I was a Christian always, but there was a Christian story that came out of that house. Story number, I believe it's story 6, Superman Goes Home. One night, I gotta tell you, I was married. This is when I was married. And I'm laying in bed. a lot of things were happening. I'd be laying in bed with my head on the pillow or on the cushion, and I'd hear scratching, like somebody scratching their nails on the pillow or just underneath the cloth, really, just like that. And I thought I had mice in my cook. I didn't know what else to think, and I couldn't sleep because just underneath my ear, I'd punch it, thinking if it's a mouse, it'll get lost. It never stopped. The next day, I finally inspected the mattress. I didn't have any mice. There was no holes in the mattress. I don't live like that, but there were no mice. So I was having that go on for a while, the scratching, and it was driving me nuts. I'd punch it, and yell at it to stop. I know that sounds insane, but it's going on all night. I was getting tired of it. Did I pray? I probably did. It eventually stopped. That was strange. One night, I was laying there in bed, and the ceiling was really low in this room. It's only about 7 foot tall, if that. 7 foot tall. This was a really weird house. Real weird. And like I said, nobody was up on the 3rd floor. Nobody lived up there. Nobody lived up there since, I'd say, 1890. Something like that. When it stopped being a hotel, that's when people stopped living up there. Because if you walked upstairs, it's like a corridor with rooms on either side. A couple of sets of corridors. Well, one night, I heard all these people walking around right above my head. And it sounded like there's 4 or 5 people with hard-soled shoes just walking all over the room above my head. And I'm laying there. And I said to my wife at the time, I didn't even know if she was awake because it was way like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it woke me up. And I says, "Hon," and she was awake, and I hear a frightened voice. So she goes, "What?" I says, "Do you hear that?" She says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, who the hell is it?" And she goes, "I don't even want to know." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. Neither do I." And put it out of my mind, went back to sleep. But there was definitely a whole bunch of people walking around above us in that place that hadn't been inhabited above us in ages. And the only way to get in there was through the hallway. We would have known if somebody went up there, and they wouldn't have. There was no lights up there, nothing. It was just abandoned. All right, let me move on to I think the final haunting story of this, which is quite unique. It has to do with an animal. It's a very tragic one. I had a cat, 1 or 2 of them, and I would see this black phantom cat. My wife saw it too, occasionally. And this cat would be running, but it wasn't hitting the ground. It was like running up right above the ground. A black cat, sooty black. And I would hear my cat. I'd be in the kitchen, and then there's a back porch. I'll do a little layout, drawing on this part to show you where I'm at. Layout. Oh, maybe not. Nah, forget that. I'm not going to do a layout. I'll just tell you about it. All right. So my cat was getting freaked out. I've heard cats get into fights. This cat was hysterical. And I'd open the door when I'd hear the cat outside my door freaking out, and my cat would come running in. And I have never in my life seen an animal, or a human being for that matter, so terrified. This cat was terrified. It'd dart in and it'd just sit there and it'd lick its lips, and its eyes would dart around. The cat was terrified. And I started wondering, what is messing with my cat? I thought maybe we had raccoons there, or maybe some stray, but I never could find it. Well, one time, this really happened. I heard the same thing again, just outside my back door. My cat freaking out like crazy. And I opened the door, my cat ran in real quick, and now that black cat that I'd seen once in a while, he ran into the back porch. And I mean, just leaped and glided. You never seen him hit the floor running. Nothing. It was just about this big, yeah, big fish story, about that big. Big black, sooty black cat. And just silently ran in. And there was only one way in and out of my back porch. And that was one door. Other than that, it was sealed off. It was all windows, but the windows were closed. And I shut the door behind it. And I said to my wife, I got that beepity beep now. I said, you with me? And she's like hiding behind me because she saw it running there too. And I got a broom and she got a camera. Let's get this. Let's see what this is about. And I went back in there. There was nothing in there. It wasn't in there. There was nowhere for it to go, nowhere for it to hide. And once again, my wife pleaded the fifth. I said, what do you think of that? She says, I don't even want to know. She was not a superstitious person. And there's some people, when they encounter paranormal, when they don't believe in any afterlife or anything, they don't want to, because it would kind of cause them to have to readjust their whole belief system, I think. But once again, she says, I don't even want to know. But it ran in there and vanished. And I saw it one more time. I saw it run through I saw it twice. I saw it once before this inside the house. And I saw it again in my dining room when I was sitting in the living room. I clearly saw that cat run. Once again, it wasn't hitting the floor. And then it just leaped up and just vanished. It would run, leap, and vanish. And I never saw it again. I never felt threatened by it. The story would end there. But I found out something tragic and something really pathetic. That some people that lived there before me, I'm not going to say any names or anything or who, but some people that lived there, some tenants, told me about the cat, that they knew that they killed this cat and they buried it, and they said it kept coming back. And I would never believe that if not for the story I just told you. And I was appalled. These people told me they killed this cat. Other partiers were partying there, apparently. And for some kind of sick kicks, they sadistically killed this cat. And I'm not going to go into how, but I was just sick to my stomach. And I wished I could have done something about it. Called the police, stopped them. This happened years before my encounter. But they said they killed this cat in a very bad way. And they buried it in the back. And the cat kept coming back. They kept seeing it. And these people are like, hey, wasn't that flipped out? Yeah. I'm like, oh, God. What are you going to do at that point? I think I might have said some prayers. I don't know. I really don't know. But it would not be unlike me to pray for its release. But I certainly was no threat to it. I never harmed it. And I can't undo the past. Or if I could, I would have done something. You can bet about that. Would have stopped it. If I couldn't stop it, I would have done something to make sure people got their just desserts for doing such a thing. So that's the story number 40. Trying to remember. Now there's some other things. Oh yeah, definitely. One time, I don't want to get into too much details, but before I lived there, something tragic happened. And other than the cat story, and I was in there with my mother and my nephew, and we were trying to pack some things up, and there was no power. Nobody lived in there for a while, and the glass on the oven just went with a loud pop, and we were all in an adjacent room, not far from it, maybe 12 feet away from it. And we all walked into the kitchen, and there was this oven hadn't been run, electric oven, had not been turned on in months, Nobody had been there for a long time. And we're looking down at the floor, and all this glass, get this, all these little pieces of glass, like about as big as a pea, This thing shattered. We swept it into a pile, and every single little piece of glass in that pile, it looked like a bunch of ants. It was all just moving around all over the place. Like each one was moving in like little figure eights. Looked like ants crawling around. And I'd sweep it up, and it looked like all the little pieces of glass had life. And they were moving around quite a bit, not just shaking. Every little piece, the whole thing was alive. The whole pile of glass. And we all just, at that point, all three of us left. Even my mom, who was pretty brave about these things. So that happened there. And there's some other stuff. Found a lot of weird stuff in there. I have this. I found a knife. Or I should say my brother gave me this knife that he found. It had a scabbard and it had a deer's foot for a handle. This knife was in the wall of the place. Now, it was in really good shape with a deer's foot for a handle, a Bowie knife. Except I had a flood 2 years ago, and this thing sat underwater, and that poor deer's foot rotted. So now I just got the knife blank. Found that. Found some old coins in there. A lot of old newspapers and furniture and stuff. And eventually I moved out. And that's story number 40. The Grove Street house. I don't know if I mentioned it at the beginning of this, but I'm good friends with the people that live there now. And they invited me to do this story in the house itself. And I thought about it, it'd be something different. But I don't want to bring any attachments back. And they say it's pretty quiet now. I think they may have a few things happen now and then, but they handle it in their own way. Well, that's it. That's story 40. Hope you're all doing well, I'm in central New York, and today's the first day Governor Cuomo said we're open for business again, so let's see how that goes. Thank you, and good night.